Oh, you can do it on the app, that's good, isn't it?
Honestly, that first sip of coffee has to be the best one. So good. Still having a little bit of almond milk in my coffee in the mornings, because that's gonna add, what, like 20 calories. I just keep that consistent as the day goes on, and any other coffees I have, I just have them like as black coffees. Like I don't put any milk in my other ones. But this is definitely my morning treat, which I will be keeping in. Don't mind this pan absolutely falling apart, guys, but it does the job. Okay guys, welcome back to the YouTube, and we have always one of everyone's favorite videos, full day of eating for today. So I'm now 2 weeks into my diet and I am 2 kilos down. So I've just checked in this morning, I've gone for my walk, I'm ready for meal 1 now. And what I'll do is a little sit down update in terms of how the week has been from like a fat loss progression perspective. For now, I just keep it about the food. So to be honest, I did actually make a little adjustment last week around midweek, and it did actually see me shift forward a nice bit, which is exactly the goal. I am quite hungry at the moment. I'm also pretty sure that I'm burning my fish. So I'm just gonna give this a little turn and use this as a shield for the oil, because sometimes it gets into my contacts and I'm like, yeah, that's not good. 2 weeks in, and I will say, I am pretty hungry. I think people think that they shouldn't be hungry until, like, you know, they've been dieting for a few weeks, but no, I am looking forward to my meals, I'll put it that way. But that's just part of the process. Remember that. Hunger is usually part of being in a fat loss phase, and it's something that you do have to be okay with sitting with to be able to see the sort of progress you want to see, especially when you're pushing maybe for a slightly quicker rate of loss, or like, you know, you're looking to make pretty solid shift forward each week. You are probably gonna have to deal with a little bit of hunger, and that is okay. I usually show my meal 1 on my YouTube videos, but just to break it down yet again, we have 1 sea bass fillet. At the moment, I don't weigh the fillets, but if I was prepping, I would definitely. They're all roughly around the same size, though, give or take like 20 grams. I have 100 grams of egg whites and 1 whole egg, and then I have 200 grams of veg, which is a mixture of broccoli, aubergine and peppers. I do love that little combo, so I just keep that in. I don't necessarily like weigh out each separate component. Like I don't weigh out like 50 grams of broccoli, 50 grams of aubergine, 100 grams of peppers. Like I don't do it. I just like kind of put everything in as 200 grams, and I just keep it simple that way. And I just really enjoy starting my days off with more so like a pro-fat breakfast. I just feel like it just almost fills me up a little bit more than, let's say, for example, when I have like cream of rice for breakfast. I just feel like that digests very quickly, and I feel like cravings are typically a little bit higher, hunger is a little bit higher after that meal. So this is my favorite way to start the day at the moment. I think what I might do is on leg days, I may bring in a little bit more carbs in breakfast now that I'm dieting, just so I actually have a bit more to push towards my session, and obviously retaining performance, which is going to be key when you actually want to retain muscle mass. So remember that it's not just about fat loss, it's also about retaining muscle mass if you want to actually retain shape. And then I think I showed this before, but I just have my little apple cider vinegar here as well, which I always have with my meal 1, and I'll take my morning supplements as well in a second. I always wait till after my meal to take my morning supplements, because I find that if I take them on an empty stomach, it just makes my stomach a little bit funny. And that's also why I do my apple cider vinegar after my meal as well. Like there are benefits to doing it fasted, but at the same time, like just for the way it makes my stomach feel, I just don't do that. So I'm gonna get this down now. There was actually a good few weeks in my off season where I actually didn't end up having like any meat. I was just having fish. And to be honest, it wasn't deliberate. I just really enjoyed it. I actually have bought in some chicken now, because I think having like as wide a range of sort of variety within your protein sources and food sources in general is always going to be beneficial. But I'm still having like fish in the morning, usually some tuna as well, some chicken, and things like yogurt, egg whites, just trying to kind of keep things quite varied. Because I don't think you'll ever go wrong for having more variety in your diet if you can actually afford that calorie-wise. And also just for enjoyment as well. I am a foodie. I do like my meals. I do like my food. And I like to enjoy my meals as well. So yeah, this is going down lovely. Lovely. We are back for meal 2, and I think that I've shown you this one before, to be fair. So hopefully this vlog isn't going to be the same as the past 3 vlogs that I've done, but we have my yogurt meal, which I always very much look forward to. I do love a Greek yogurt meal on, where are my long spoons? It's not even going to track my face again, but I always like to make sure that I have a long enough spoon that, you know, the worst thing in the world is when your spoon, when you have like a baby spoon, it falls into the Tupperware or whatever bowl you're using, and it's just laid there like this, just sinking into the bowl of oats. That's the worst thing. So I always like to make sure I have a long latte spoon, because you get the benefit of a teaspoon top and the longer handle. Totally just lost my train of thought there. I do love yogurt meals in a fatless phase because you just can get so much volume out of them. Obviously super high protein as well, but you can really fill a pretty big bowl. Actually, you know what? I should take it out rather than put it in. You can fill a pretty big bowl for not a crazy amount of calories. And it's also great as well when you add some sweetener and some cinnamon for curbing those sweet cravings, if you ever get those. And it's just fairly satiating, to be honest. So what goes into my yogurt? So firstly, I will always put in a little bit of salt. So I'll weigh out a gram of salt, put that into there. And then I will put in cinnamon. I know that that looks grim in a bag like that, but every time, this is the Tesco sweet cinnamon, and if I use it and I put it down on the counter, there is cinnamon everywhere. So I just pop it back into the bag to save that mess. Put in a little bit, a pinch, like the tiniest little bit of this bulk sucralose, because this I actually use for everything. So whether that is my yogurt, my oats, I don't put it into cream of rice because that's already sweet, but even coffee, a little bit goes such a long way. Like, this is so sweet. If you struggle to digest sucrose at all, stevia is another option, but I just find that these last so long, like, because you only have to use such a small amount, they last forever. And I will be putting that into my yogurt as well. So that just gives it a little bit more sweetness rather than it just being quite like, you know what 0% fat Greek yogurt is like. It's kind of a bit like sour, like, so, oh my God, what am I doing here? But it definitely just helps with the flavour, for sure. So just so you get an idea of how much sweetener I'm putting in it, it's literally just that on the end of like a coffee stirrer, and I'm dropping it everywhere, so I'm just gonna pop it in now. So just a very, very small amount. You won't need much at all. Well, actually, you know what? Maybe I'll put in a little bit more. Meal 2 is finished. We have 350 grams of Greek yogurt, so super high volume, high in protein, and also just super tasty. So in that, 150 grams of raspberries and 15 grams of almond butter. The almond butter that I use is the same one I've used ever since prep. It's the Pippa Nut Coconut Almond, and it is the best almond butter I think that you can really get taste-wise. So I would highly, highly recommend you trying that. But yeah, I'm gonna get this down, and then I'll do a little bit of a catch-up. It is now coming up to 12 o'clock. So this is usually where I do my second block of steps. This time I'll use the walking pad. Usually in the morning, first thing, I'll always go out for a walk, like outside, if the weather is not terrible, because I think that you get massive benefit from just getting out in the daylight, especially now that the mornings are getting a little bit lighter, which I'm loving. I think that there is a big benefit to actually getting sunlight, you know, in your eyes, just to start your day off. So I'll always try and make sure that I'm doing a walk outside for about 45 minutes or so in the morning. So that is sort of how I start my day. And then, like I said, second block will be about 30 to 40 minutes on the walking pad. Now, this is a rest day today, so usually this would be what I would do just before I have my pre-workout meal on the training day, but obviously I push my meals back a little bit on a rest day in the afternoon, just because obviously we're not getting to the gym to train. But honestly, a walking pad is so handy. Like, it's something that a few of my girls have had them they just find it so much easier to hit their steps. Now, don't get me wrong, there's kind of no reason why you shouldn't be getting your steps, even if you don't have a walking pad, because, you know, that's what a coat and a hat is for, whatever the weather. But at the same time, it's just convenient not having to put your shoes on, not having to like try and wrap yourself up if it is raining outside. You can literally just put the walking pad down, it slides under your sofa or your bed, and just crank it up to like a nice little power walk. Remember, be intentional with what you're doing, and then you're literally ready to go. I am caffeinated, I'm hydrated, and I'm ready for a cozy chit chat about progress so far this week. So I think I mentioned earlier, I am another kilo down, which is fantastic. I've gone from 68.5 to I think my lowest this week has been 66.6 kilos. I'll say, looking at pictures, now that I've properly had a chance to look through them, I am really, really happy with the shape that I'm seeing. Definitely coming in just a little bit more, especially in my like upper body and my waist. I'm excited to keep seeing this come in now. One thing that I have noticed is because I've kept myself just that little bit tighter this past off season or last building phase, I feel like I don't obviously have that far to come down before I really start to see some better shape and definition come through, which is really nice, because even after a couple of weeks, I'm already starting to see that. Now, obviously, because I do have a good bit of muscle mass, I can retain shape pretty well, even with a bit more body fat in a building phase. But then it also means that if I do keep things a bit tighter in a building phase as well, when I come down, I'm starting to see all of that come through quicker than what I usually would, let's say, whereas in previous building phases or like off-season phases, I have pushed up a good bit heavier, and that has meant, you know, I've accrued a lot of tissue in that time, but at the same time, it does mean that I have to come down a lot more before I start to see that shape coming through, as now 2 weeks in, already starting to get a glimpse of that. So nice for me as well that where I tend to hold my body fat the most is I'm not so much that typical female that holds like loads of their body fat in their glutes. Not that I'm jealous at all about that, but it is the card that I was dealt to hold a bit more body fat when I'm bringing that up in a building phase in my upper body and in my midsection. But my midsection actually is one of my strongest body parts when I've stood on stage before. Now, that has started to come in a bit more, and just feel like my shape in off season can be very, very different from my shape when I'm lean. So just being able to see a little bit more of that come through is so, so rewarding. Now, I actually have made a bit of an adjustment a few days back. Scale will start to get a little bit sticky. Now, that's okay for a few days, but eventually you almost want to be like, okay, need to make some changes. Changes that were made were a drop in food, about 200 calories both days, training days and rest days. I've not had or implemented any like refeed days yet, but I will, but I'll base that off of my training performance, because obviously I want to make sure that I'm retaining training performance. If you're retaining training performance, you retain muscle, you retain shape. That's really important. Keep reassessing that. But a small pull from food, I've actually brought cardio in. So I'm doing cardio after every session in the week. So that will either fall as in, like I'll do 4 or 5 cardio sessions a week, depending on like what my split falls at. So I just chuck in 20 minutes post-workout. Steps are still 15K, as excluding the steps that I do in my cardio. So I take my tracker off for those. So that has kind of allowed me to just drive things on a little bit more and pull off that kilo this past week. So I'm excited just to keep the ball rolling now. Visuals are most definitely changing. Now, with refeeds, I'm only going to utilize them when I really need to. But I will be putting those in as like little stops along the way, just to kind of keep my body fresh mentally as well, but also just mainly for training performances, try to keep that pushing on and not becoming an absolute wet wipe in the gym, because we do not want that. Now, one reason why I want to be open-minded about when I do take those, or mindful about when I do take those, is because, and this is a double-edged sword, because I've actually kept myself a good bit leaner this past building phase, it does mean that I already have a leaner starting point, so I have less to come down, which is fantastic. But I will say I have been a little bit slack about building my food up last building phase, as you know, I knew that I wanted to maintain. It's because I knew that I wanted to keep things tighter this last time around, and as much as my body weight did push up, I didn't push my food up that much. So towards the back end, I was like kind of very much at a maintenance for a little while, and I probably could have pushed my food up a little bit more. But then because my food hasn't started at a higher starting point, I've also had to go a little bit more aggressive with the diet out the gate as well, to elicit the sort of response that I want to see. So at the moment, I would say like food is around like maybe 1800 calories or so, like on average, depending on a training day or rest day, which for me is actually quite low. Like in preps before, I've actually finished with my food probably around like 1500 calories or so for last prep. But then obviously assistance in play as well. So that's something you need to keep in mind if someone's competing or in prep at the time. So that is obviously not the case at the moment, bar just a little bit of cleanse. But in regards to the fact that I've had to go a little bit more aggressive, that's what I already thought would be the case, because I'm not built food as high. I'm also not as heavy. I'm not as heavy starting, which means that I require less calories just moving my body around on a day-to-day, which also would have meant that I didn't need as much food that I've needed before in an off-season. I just don't require as many calories to move myself around or train, being that I'm not as heavy as what I have been in previous building phases. Every diet, depending on your starting point, with your body composition and with food as well, could look very, very different, and that's okay. I think that sometimes you can get very fixed on not just what other people are doing in terms of like how many calories she needs to diet on, or she needs to diet on, and she needs to diet on, and why am I on this when she's on this? But even comparison to yourself and what you've done in the past. But remember that every single diet is going to be different. Like every single person is going to require different calories to be in a deficit or create a deficit or create the rate of loss that they want to see. So keep that in mind, because it won't look the same as someone else. It won't look the same as maybe previous diets you've done. Maybe you have to push harder than someone else. Maybe you have to do more cardio, have less food to have the same rate of loss. Or even maybe you do have to push it a good bit harder. But at the end of the day, you do what you need to do within reason, and there can never really be any comparison from one person to the next, or even from diet phase you did 2 years ago to a diet phase you've done now. Now, if things were really, really off when it comes to your body's just not responding anywhere near the way that you think that it should be, then that might be a route to actually explore more blood work and go down that route, see if there's anything underlying there. But just please keep that in mind, is that you can't compare to anybody else. You can't even really compare to previous dieting phases that you've done in the past. So just be mindful of that. So I'm just about to get my meal 3 ready. But before I do that, I'm actually just going to put my chicken in the air fryer. I used to cook this in the pan, but I've just found that, God, in the air fryer, you just leave it in there for 20 minutes at 180 and it comes out like perfection. So, you know, kind of saves me having to just stand around and wait for it to cook on the pan, like stirring it and all that. But firstly, I need to make sure that I can actually get this foil in without ripping it with my nails, because that happens practically every single time. So, what am I going to season that with? I'm going to pop on some of this Kinder's seasoning. It's all-purpose meat and veggie rub. We actually I got this in Vegas, and it is unreal. Like, I don't know what they do with seasonings out in the US, but they just have that much more variety, and they're just that much better. So this is my seasoning of choice for today. Remember, guys, that you can make your meals taste nice. They don't have to be super bland. Obviously, just keep in mind that some seasonings do have, like, obviously calories in, and some more than others. Obviously, they're probably going to have a bit more sodium in and salt in as well. So just make sure you're going steady with that. But it's a great way of just changing up the flavorings or the flavor of, like, your meat or your carbs or anything like that, just so you can have more variety in and just enjoy it a little bit more. So that's going to go in for like 20 minutes at 180. You know what? I was supposed to put bread in the air fryer. Right, scrap that, that'll go in after. So this meal always starts off with some cherry tomatoes. Also, I apologize for the lisp that I always get when I take my Invisalign out. It's actually worrying me now, because I'm like, what if I just have a lisp forever now when I don't have my Invisalign in? But I'm hoping that I'll just get used to it. Actually, funny story with that. I went to the orthodontist, wherever I get my Invisalign done. And they said that if my teeth move too fast, that I could wobble them all out. So basically, my treatment time has now become 2 extra months longer. And I'm very grateful to be able to have my teeth straightened, but I'm like, fuck yeah, now, like, that's a long time of just taking them in and out, like, just having to peel them off like in coffee shops, it is a nightmare. But anyways, back to the meal. So always starts off with some, are they plum? No, they're not cherry tomatoes, they're plum tomatoes. 150 grams, and I always like to eat these first because I don't like it when they, not that they, I don't care if everything touches each other on the plate, but I just don't like it when they touch something warm and they go warm. Like I just like them when they're kind of cold. We always have these little things like that. The pan is warming up with some fry light, and that's for some egg whites in a second, because I find the egg whites, you know, they're quite, you get quite a good bit of volume for them, and they're practically just straight protein. Honestly, tomatoes, especially when they're good ones, Tesco plum tomatoes, they're the best. With some salt, and they're kind of sweet. Oh, underrated. So this here is meal 3. So here we have 25 grams of avocado, we have 50 grams of sourdough, which to be fair is sweet fuck all, but have to keep the avocado and sourdough combo in. 150 grams of egg whites, which I mentioned that I really like in fatloss phase just for the extra volume. Obviously very, very high in protein, practically like nothing else. And then a little squeeze of 50-50 ketchup. And then always on my eggs, I will put on this aromat seasoning. My eggs just do not taste the same without this. This is the key to good eggs. So I'm going to enjoy this now. Oh, and also the 150 grams of tomatoes I had, but I always have those first. I'm going to enjoy this now, and then I'm going to get to some work, and I'll catch up with you in the next meal. So what do rest days actually look like for me? Obviously, where I don't have that big gap in the middle of the day where I'm out at the gym training. So usually I'll get my check-ins done like literally I start first thing, and they'll take up the majority of my morning, and then that gives me the gap in the afternoon to do things like planning content, putting content together, any additional client plans that I need to do or redo or make adjustments to. And also, let's say for example on a weekend like this, I need to keep on top of things like changing sheets, washing, hoovering, housework, all of that as well. So sometimes like I'm like, oh shit, like when you're really busy working, like, oh yeah, that stuff does also need to be sorted too. So this particular Saturday has actually been quite relaxed because I'm a bit ahead of work in terms of planned content, etc. I did a bunch of filming yesterday in the gym for Reels with Jack, and then the majority of last week was spent like planning new content, keeping on top of client work, and just trying to make sure that I provide the best possible service that I can for my girls, which is literally the priority to me. So when I've had like quite a big, high mental capacity week, or there's a lot more mental demand, or let's say for example, almost a half day of filming where it's quite high energy, I find that sometimes I can get to the next day and I call it like my creative candle, but it's sort of burnt. So I almost need to take a day, which comes in handy really at a weekend where I need to do things like housework anyway, because I then don't have to do any like high mental energy tasks today. I can just focus on doing all of that, because I feel like when I try and like push through, when I've like hit that level of like that creative candle being burnt out and I try and push through it, I get very, very frustrated that my brain isn't working at its normal capacity. So I'm almost better off just doing other tasks that aren't so demanding from me mentally at that point in time, and then pushing those to a time where like I've had that bit of a reset, and I can then move forward feeling like I can be a lot more productive towards those tasks. I think there is something to do with like being a business owner, being self-employed, working for yourself, but I find that I can never be productive enough. And there always feels like there's something to be done. Like in the back of your head, there's always something that has to be done, which is why it's literally so easy to end up working like all day on something. But it's something that definitely trying to get a little bit better at in terms of just planning being very, very organized. Obviously like with fitness, just being organized in a week, organized with like when your productive times are, making that time count, not making yourself a busy fool, basically making that productive time, which is also including steps back when needed. When I feel like my rate of productivity is not quick enough, I'm like beating myself up for it. I'll always go in with an idea of like how much I want to get done, and if that doesn't get done, because usually I set myself an unrealistic target sometimes, and then I'm quite hard on myself about that. But it's something that I am trying to get better at, and I think that days like this of a weekend just where I can sort of catch up on other things that, like I said, are lower mental capacity tasks. That just allows me to have that little bit of a reset that I need. Obviously, I'm going to still do work throughout the day, but it's not so sort of creative where it requires me to be thinking of like new ideas or things to put together or anything like that. I've done the majority of that across the whole week, Monday through Friday. So now it's actually been probably the most relaxed rest day I've had for probably 2 or 3 weeks now. And here we have meal 5. I'm trying to bosh through these last couple of meals because I've already been talking for far too long today. But that is 100 grams of chicken breast, that's raw weight, and then I have 100 grams of potato, which is also a pretty measly amount to be fair, and then 150 grams of cucumber with a little bit of lighter than light mayo. I also had a square of dark chocolate with that, but I actually ate it already, so sorry I can't show you that bit. And here was the 5th and final meal. So you can see here that I'm just making my way into a paste for my little rest day oat bowl, which I always sit down and enjoy with Mark when we are just chilling out, watching some Netflix. But what I have here basically is 25 grams of whey isolate, 60 grams of oats, which I literally just make with water, 100 grams of berries, and 10 grams of dark chocolate. So that sort of caps off the day for me. Can never be an oat bowl pre-bed, in my opinion. And here is the whey that I use as well. I've literally used this whey for literally 3 years, but it is the ISO Surge by Mutant in cookies and cream, probably the best whey you'll ever taste in your entire life and digest perfectly as well. It is now the following day, just checking back in. Body weight this morning was exactly the same as yesterday. I've actually got legs today as well, so I think after a leg session, doing some cardio after that, which is going to be brutal, I think I might see a little bit of a drop tomorrow. But just to round this off with the overall calories and macros, so yesterday's non-training day was 1,646 calories, 172 grams of protein, 136 grams of carbs, and 46 grams of fat. So those are the numbers there. Like I said, not super high for me, but at the same time, it's doing the job, which is the main thing. I'm going to leave it there because I've definitely spoken enough in this video. I've actually got a consult in 30 minutes as well, so I'm just going to review all her information. But if you liked the video, please do like, share, subscribe, and comment if there's anything else that you want to see, or if you have any other questions. I'll see you in the next one.